And then I doubled that, but I just played it an octave lower. Which feels like almost a brass instrument made of chainsaws was kind of how I felt with that.
My name is Cameron, better known as Venus Theory. I'm a composer, sound designer, and content creator. These days, I mostly work in games and film and do a little bit of everything in between.
I'm Jason Graves, better known as the Scary Music Guy. For the last 2 decades, I've been working in games, as well as film and TV.
And together, we're friends. Aww.
I started doing a lot of film, and I have this inherent cinematic voice in my head, which I think is one of the things that we vibe on equally, is that immediately it's a texture, it's a melody, it's something that just within a half a second can paint a picture in the viewer's or the gamer's mind. And the possibilities with the Summit, with the different LFOs, all the modulation options, you can literally program a patch that every time you hit the same key, it's giving you something different every time.
Yeah, I think the art to cinematic sound in games and film or whatever is just building things that tell some sort of story and place you in an environment or an ecosystem, or just bring the world off the screen and put you into it. I think it's something that removes that natural layer of separation that the medium dictates, and I think something like this is a great tool for that because it can be very precise, it can be very chaotic, or it can be somewhere in between with a dependable sense of inconsistency. In this video, we're going to be showing you how we built an interactive game music cue using Novation's Summit synthesizer. We'll be walking you through everything from the ground up to show you how we took this single cue, cut it apart, stemmed it out, put it into middleware, and prepped it into a fully interactive game music system, all from just one piece of music. Starting this track off was really simple, and I mean about as simple as you can reasonably get. I started off with 0008, which is the first patch on the Summit. As soon as you turn it on, so we layered that together with just a couple very simple complementary elements, and putting just 3 things together. And that kept me thinking about, if we're going hybrid, what does it mean to take a synthetic sound and make it organic? So I started recording different one-shots and doing some experiments with them here. This comes from one of the factory patches, A107, and I ended up just time stretching it into absolute oblivion and then reversing it. So from there, it was a matter of just building out on top of this to sell the idea. And I came up with this really interesting low atmospheric hit.
Yeah, I like that one.
And then we tied it all together with a little bass pulse in the middle. Incredibly simple sounds, even all together, but it really built out a sense of I think just an atmosphere.
What I love about what you initially sent over is it's simple and there's opportunities for ideas, but it's also setting a vibe immediately. I heard this when you first sent it, and I immediately heard a melody that was playing. I didn't necessarily feel like we needed to do a whole lot more, and all I did was add a little bit of orchestra, complementing that cool note you started on at the very top. And that's how our melody ends up getting shaped. And while we're talking about hybrid, I feel like nothing would be complete without our wonderful staccato strings. Could you get more simple than that? And the nice thing is these 4-bar phrases make it really easy to repeat the phrase if you need to, or have something else come in and play the second phrase, layer things on top of that. We have this nice interchangeable musical puzzle almost already. There's no brass yet, so I wanted to add some brass, and what I wanted the brass to do was do the heroic thing, make the melody sound a little bigger and more noble in the horns, but also add some harmony.
By this point, we had a pretty fully realized idea. We had our melodic statement, and we just needed to develop that to finish out the arrangement of the song. So we ended up building out this section, which acts as just a little bit of a pause. Before we build into something bigger. And this is where I'm bringing in a lot of new sounds. One of the first things I did was just bring that melody back in. And this was a lot of experimenting to play with the Summit and get something that felt string-like. Which I love how textural that is, and it almost feels like an amp breaking up, but it also almost feels like guitar feedback. And then I doubled that, but I just played it an octave lower. Which feels like almost a brass instrument made of chainsaws was kind of how I felt with that. So I tried to just build off the sort of percussive nature of everything that was going so far. Then I doubled that and just played it low. And that gave us what ended up being a combat section, because by this point we're starting to think in terms of gameplay structure. We know we're going to be exploring, we know we're going to get into combat, and we know that at some point we're going to be kind of sneaking around or transitioning between these two states. So we have our exploration section, a tent section, and a combat section. So with combat comes drums. Since we knew we were going for a hybrid sound, we needed to combine some electronic drums and some organic drums. Really punchy. And you put that all together with the synths, and we start to get this. And we've got combat going, easy. From there, it was just about getting some transitions going. These aren't anything too complicated, and I'm putting them in the arrangement in this case just to feed the song as it's arranged. So we're transitioning from these early sections into the middle. But I know in the game engine stuff, I can cut these individual transitions out and rearrange them to trigger anywhere we want, which means it's probably time to talk about how do we actually turn this into a piece of video game music. This is a program called FMOD, which is one of several different middleware tools. And middleware is basically just a fancy version of what musicians might be used to as a DAW. So we start off our session, as you would expect, just kind of hanging out. But if I hit play, you'll hear that only something else is happening. And this is because I wanted to program something that was very dynamic. So we can have a pretty quiet, chill behavior. Very sparse, very atmospheric, but I can up the ambient control to make it even more subtle. We have another control here called Quest Path. And I figured that would drive the player forward to do a behavior we want them to do. We want you to finish this quest or this level or get that thing. And as we get closer to doing that, we reward them musically. Another one I have here is Stealth, where I figured we can maybe sneak around, but we still want to add a sense of drive to that happening, even if this is just looping over and over. So we can enter the stealth state. So from here, you have to think a little bit differently about music, because we could enter stealth and then be detected, or we could exit stealth and go back to doing nothing. So we can go into a detected state. So from here, maybe we get into some combat. We've been detected, and now we get into a fight. Right now. And this feels like fight music, but you might notice that a lot of elements are missing. And this is because we knew we needed dynamic combat music. We can't just have everything happening all the time. So this is where this intensity control comes in. And keep in mind, this could go up or down. And then we also need to consider other options that the player might have, where if we're in a fight for a long time, we might start running out of health. So I added a low health mechanic here, which just sort of sucks the energy out without pausing the music. So then we can heal ourselves and get right back into the fight. But maybe the fight is difficult and they want to look up cheat codes because they're not very good at games and they're going to pause the game. So then I needed to figure out how can I add a system for pausing things, which is really just a simple filter. You maybe defeat the enemies and now we get out of combat, so we're not detected anymore. There is no more combat, and we're going to get a transition from the combat right back to the exploration. And then we have an option for the melody, so I can just kind of fade it in. That's the magic of middleware, is it lets you pull your tracks apart in really interesting ways and turn even pretty simple ideas into extremely long pieces of music that always keep moving.
The beauty of having control like this too, and a lot of people watching this may not realize it, but we can control how quickly the music reacts, how quickly the music switches modes. It can be really fast, instantaneous, or musically and on a beat, which is usually the way I prefer to have things. So the music's sort of reacting to the gameplay instead of being predictive.
Yeah, it's entirely up to you, and I think that's the fun of music system design, is it's completely open. All options are equal. You can do whatever you want as long as you're willing to commit and program the entire system.
So I'm a bit of a tweaker, and it's the kind of thing that having all of these possibilities right in front of me without needing to menu dive is just really inspirational.
Yeah, the hands-on ability of it, I think, is just a lot of value. It doesn't ever really pull you out of the moment, but as soon as you want to go deeper into editing a sound, it's really easy to get pretty disgustingly far into the weeds.
I love the distortions and having different points to distort the sound, as well as everyone talks about it, but the effects and the reverb especially is just amazing.
And then the ability to modulate all of these within the mod matrix, the distortions, the effects, the layering. I mean, there's just so much headroom for where do you want an idea to go, and then also to keep it a little bit unpredictable all the time, I think is really valuable to build a sound that sells an idea.
Another thing that I think our brains have in common is whatever might be trendy or the sound at the moment, we both run in the exact opposite direction, like screaming, because I believe originality shines through ultimately, and being true to yourself, doing things that you think are interesting, using hardware that can help translate sort of what you're hearing in your brain that is unique and personal to you will translate to listeners down the road.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to build your voice by avoiding absorbing other people's. I think we all learn through osmosis to some extent, but whenever you're writing on a project, I think the worst possible thing you can do is listen to the reference material or try and find reference material that's similar to the thing you're supposed to be making, because then you're never gonna find your version of that. You're just gonna be doing an iteration of something that's already been done. And that's not interesting, and if it's not interesting, I don't think that can ever be valuable.
If you're curious to try the sounds we've built,
You can get them absolutely free on Novation Components.